I want to make one statement here that I think is the most important thing I can say, just because I am worried about where society is going, which is what this movie is about. Is that as a filmmaker, as a video editor of 20 years, director of 20 years, there's a hair's breadth between thinking someone is competent and thinking someone is an idiot in the edit. And when you see a clip on Instagram, on TikTok, on YouTube, when you see a clip, if you look at just that clip and go, oh, that person's an awful, evil person, you are just seeing the glimpse that will make you feel that way. I want you to think about that. As someone who has made terrible actors look like good actors, trust me when I say that you should not trust what you see on this. Alright, here we go into Eddington spoilers. Aloha movie nerds, dorks, and weirdos. Welcome to the spoiler section of Eddington. For those of you who didn't see the spoiler-free version and are still interested in Eddington, it's about a small-town sheriff, the sheriff of Eddington, who decides to run for mayor in order to combat the policies that have shut down his entire town of Eddington due to COVID. And he just wants to bring people back to a more traditional sense of humanity and compassion. And, it's a really well-meaning movie. It's a really important movie, I think, for everyone to see, especially Americans in today's climate of technology dependence. And I think, spoiler-free, if you're an Ari Aster fan, you have to watch this movie just so you can talk to other Ari Aster fans. And if you are a regular moviegoer, I think you absolutely should watch the first half of this movie and then decide for yourself if you want to stick through the second half of the movie. You'll know exactly where the second half is because you'll be asking yourself, why the hell is he doing this? Why the hell did he shoot that guy? And that's where we're at when you get to the second half of this movie. So here we go into the spoilers for Eddington. I really thought it was the first half was solid, and I still have my thoughts about the second half. I'm going to joust with Ari Aster from a safe place where he can't talk back to me, okay? Boom, 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 boom. I'm going to be really mean to him in this video because that's what I do when I don't like things. Because that's what people like, and it just feeds both my ego and hopefully in the future my bank account, because hate fuel is what people like. Yeah, hate fuel, yeah. Spoilers for Eddington, starting now. All right, welcome to the Eddington spoiler review. I am a big dork, and now you all know it. First of all, please forgive me for not bringing up Emma Stone or Austin Butler in the spoiler-free section, the spoiler-free video. Frankly, she has a very small part in the movie, and not that it's insignificant, but I just felt like the larger points of the movie had to be made. But I do love Emma Stone. It was nice to see her in this film. Her one major scene in this movie I thought is great. It's a real testament to her as an actress that she can convey so much without saying specifically what's going on with her character. I really want to see if there's a longer cut of this movie, that especially if it has more of her, I would love to see that. But okay, before I get into the things I don't like, I just want to celebrate the first half of this movie. Things that I really noticed that are kind of little clues. The very start of this movie starts off with Joaquin Phoenix. He's just eating alone in his car by himself, far away from people. And two cops pull up to him and are angry that he's not wearing his mask. He is not near anyone. He is nowhere near anybody. And he's being harassed about not wearing his mask by other police officers. And it's just, that by itself is a satire of the entire situation we lived under during the COVID shutdowns, which is like, you can't even be by yourself and not wear a mask. And you see people, I remember seeing people drive around in their cars, windows shut, wearing masks. And what exactly is the point of that? You are by yourself now. So, I mean, unless it's because you're using air filters, maybe, I don't know. I don't see how COVID could survive with all this thing spewing out of your muffler. But okay, fine, but still, it's just insanity. But that first scene is like a perfect satire of the situation, that he can't even eat by himself in the middle of nowhere without being hassled about his mask and the dangers of not wearing it. And then going to the store, which I did mention that in the spoiler free video, but going to the store and the old man gets thrown out because he's not wearing a mask right after Joaquin Phoenix told people to let him in. So it's like his authority doesn't even matter. So his authority is being challenged by these policies, but also it's his perspective on life. And Ari Aster talks about Joaquin Phoenix's character as being very sentimental, which is part of the problem, that he's so sentimental he can't quite fully appreciate the notions of what he's doing or going after, that he's so sentimental about his town, he runs for mayor without asking his wife if that's okay, which is causes tension between him and Emma Stone right from the start. And I think the same thing is happening to the other people. It's that I forget the character's name. Is it Jim? There's Jim, and then there's the son of Ted Garcia, who are friends. And Jim, they both like the same girl, the still blonde chick. And I want to point something out that I think is important, is that when Jim first tries to talk to the blonde chick at this COVID party where everyone's, 50 feet from each other, he notices that she's reading this book. He learns about this book, and he knows more about it than she does. He's trying to talk to her about it and sort of impress her with his knowledge. He knows more about the book than she does. And Ari Aster, I think, points out that it was the phone that gave him information on the book before he had, even really put two and two together. So, in a way, the subtle hints of being puppeted by your phone are already happening in this movie. And frankly, I've noticed a bit in myself in my own life. We all, I think most people recognize that when you say something, the phone picks it up and then gives you an ad about it 10 minutes later, or sometimes even shorter than that. I've literally had conversations with people, turn on my phone, ad immediately appears about exactly the thing I was wanting or hungry about. It's very disturbing. It is a breach of privacy. And, it's something that we should be outraged against and fighting, but we're too busy fighting about other stuff instead. So, who cares about privacy when you can be sold something you don't actually want? But anyway, this whole scene is about exactly this concern, is that the algorithm gave him information about the book she's reading. He knows more about the book than she does. She's sitting there holding this book about society. She doesn't even care. She hasn't even read it yet. You know what I mean? But he has made his whole world around trying to impress her. And that's what this opening scene is really about. The subtext, what's not being stated, is he wants to impress her and make her like him by being interested in the things that she's interested in. But even she is not aware of the things she is pretending to be interested in. So when you see the BLM riots happen, and she's talking about all this stuff, and he's on the bandwagon of anti-whiteness, and he's only doing it to impress her and to make her like him, and it's not going to work. It's just not going to work. A lesson to young people out there: just be you. And if they're not interested in you by you being yourself, granted, you should still try to dress nicely, have good hygiene. These things matter. Have good hygiene. Look, this is not a great haircut. I do it myself, but I do cut my own hair. At least cut your hair. Bathe, dress reasonably well, and that's the only thing you really need to do for other people, but also for yourself. But look, she's not going to like you. She likes Ted Garcia's kid. And he just keeps committing harder and harder to trying to impress her. But he's just going down the rabbit hole of the anti-white movement. It's like, you're white. Like, what the hell are you saying? And then, but what I want to point out, like another important piece of dialogue is during the BLM protest when Joaquin and the other cops show up, and she's screaming at the black officer Michael. And by the way, I really like the cast of the cops. Joaquin Phoenix, the guy who plays Guy, and the actor who plays Michael, whose name is also Michael. There's just a funny trio. I love their first scene together when Joaquin Phoenix decides he wants to be mayor. And you realize these are just guys. They're just run of the mill, normal guys. I think probably their only bias is baseball and who likes what beer and what pizza. Like, they're just dudes, you know what I mean? Which is to me another huge statement. Like, when we try to stand up against the government or people, it's like, a lot of these people are just you in a uniform. They're just regular, run of the mill people doing their jobs. Or in this case, they're not doing their job because they can't do their job. Because one of the first scenes we have is Joaquin Phoenix talking to Ted Garcia saying, I can't do my job. You reduced my budget. We have one jail cell. You made me get rid of my entire staff. And Ted saying, no, it's your mismanagement of your staff that made them all go away. And some of them were accused of doing very wrong things. So we don't really know what the exact truth is, but it seems like there's some valid points on both sides for why things are the way they are. Which, again, I think the point of this movie is that the real truth is in the middle of perspectives. The threat of this movie is singular perspectives that refuse to acknowledge the points of view of others, which, again, going back to the BLM protest, when the three dudes show up, I'm just calling them the three dudes for right now, when they show up to the protest, and that little blonde girl, the last time we saw her, she couldn't even tell you a fact about the book she was holding in her hand. And she was not even vaguely interested in anything serious except for making out with Ted Garcia's kid. But in this case, when you see her now, she's indoctrinated. She's standing up against herself. And then she's screaming in Michael's face about how he should be angry and standing up against the system. But I think the wonderful piece of dialogue is she acknowledges, I don't know what it's like to be you. And I can't speak for you. And yet she is speaking for him and telling him what to say, what to think. And he's just not reacting to it. I mean, he is, but he isn't. I really like his performance. It's so understated where I kind of feel like he's considering it. He's like, are these things I should be mad about? But do I really want you telling me that I should be mad about these things? It just kind of doesn't make sense, I think maybe I should decide if I'm mad about it or not. And that's what I kind of like about this movie, is like the one black guy in the entire movie. He's the only one who's like cool about everything, and he's just like, but it's everyone else freaking out because no one's sure if they're supposed to perform compassion and guilt or if they should be cool. You know what I mean? And that's where the rest of society is all gridlocked and not being sure how much they should be concerned. You know what I mean? And then kind of overcorrecting because they feel like, well, the phone told me that if I'm not reacting to this, I'm allowing bad things to happen. And so you're just seeing how the internet is, just by virtue of gaslighting, emotional manipulation, is making people feel like they've got to do things regardless of whether they actually have to do them. But opening images and moments in movies are so crucial because these are the places where filmmakers can say what they have to say while also setting you up for what the movie is about. And most people will take that in the sense of the genre, but I'm gonna refer right now to the opening of Hollow Man. Hollow Man, starring Kevin Bacon, directed by the wonderful Paul Verhoeven. Well, I don't know if he's wonderful, but I know his directing, well, the final form is definitely wonderful. I would certainly like to meet the guy. But the opening scene of Hollow Man, you see a little rat scurrying around, and then suddenly something grabs the rat that you can't see, and you see the rat being squished and ultimately bursting into a bunch of blood. And then you realize the blood splatters over what seems to be an invisible mouth, chewing up the rat and consuming it. And so this visual, it's telling us two things, okay? The novice filmmaker will just tell you, oh, it's because it's a horror movie about being invisible, right? But it's also suggesting there's the invisible threat that you're not really aware of. You know, it's present, but you're not aware of it. And so that invisible threat in this movie is Kevin Bacon. Amongst this group of scientists that Hollow Man's about, this group of scientists are trying to make a serum that can make people invisible upon command. But they have to go through the hard process of actually making someone invisible. Now, they've solved invisibility. What they can't fix is turning someone visible again. That's what this whole opening scene is about. We see this invisible gorilla eating, and they're trying to turn the gorilla back to being visible again, but they fail. And Kevin Bacon, he's the smartest of them all. He's the best of them all. He's the one who can solve the situation, and they actually solve it in the next sequence with the gorilla. But the problem with the movie is the whole premise is that the goal of this is to make humans invisible, and Kevin Bacon volunteers to be the guinea pig to become invisible. But the invisible threat, which is set up in these early scenes, is that he has an ego. He has an ego that's bigger than the planet. And it's only checked by the fact that he really has no powers. You know, he has no invisibility. He can't do anything more than being a regular human being. But on top of having this massive ego, there's a love triangle of sorts. Elizabeth Shue is one of the fellow scientists, and she's in a relationship with Josh Brolin. And so there's a tension here because she was with Kevin Bacon. Kevin Bacon still wants her, but she's with Josh Brolin. And he is, without a doubt, the lesser scientist, but the better human being. He's just a nicer guy who means well and tries to look out for what's best for the team. He's kind of the traditional leader type, but Kevin Bacon is the leader in terms of the science. And so when Kevin Bacon goes invisible, he experiences that cabin fever that I talked about before because he must stay confined to this science lab until they figure out how to make him visible again. And across this movie, Kevin Bacon becomes the villain. His invisibility goes right back to his ego where he's like, wait a minute, I'm invisible. I can do whatever I want now. And he starts doing terrible things. And so what starts off in the opening scene is just the animal instinct to eat. It becomes that animal instinct to just go out and hunt. And so Kevin Bacon quite literally becomes a predator in this movie because he's gifted with invisibility. And so the opening image has a lot to telling that story in short form. So with that in mind, when we look at the opening image of Eddington, it's of a homeless man's feet walking. You see the pants are ragged, the feet are sunburned, and skin chipping, toenails chipping, and you just hear a man ranting, sounding crazy. And he's talking about a missing daughter. But when he speaks with a bah, he sounds like a sheep. And that's a huge, huge symbol about what the movie's about. We've all heard this sort of talk about people as sheeple, that the sheep just go wherever they're herded, right? This is something I resisted hearing a lot in my younger days. But as I get older, I realize, oh my God, it's true. It is actually very true. And which George Carlin himself warns about is that people, when they get into groups, they get into the group think, and they no longer think as individuals anymore. They think as a group. And that often leads to very bad situations and behaviors and slogans that aren't true. And again, I'm saying this, and you're going to think about the political party that you don't like, right? I'm not even going to name one, but I say this, and you're immediately thinking about the political party that you don't like, right? That's your first freaking thought. But that too is an example of the sheeple mentality, because this guy is clearly driven to madness, but his part in the movie is also very important to that very theme, because the movie starts off with him disturbing a bar where Ted Garcia is holding a council meeting, and he's trying to sell something to these people. We know he's trying to sell something to them. We don't know what it is, but they're being bothered by this homeless guy. And then so Joaquin Phoenix's first call is to go deal with the homeless guy. The homeless guy breaks into the bar, and while everyone else backs away, you got these 3 large adult men terrified by the homeless guy, and the sheriff, who is the same height and strength as the rest of them, but he's just one guy. Everyone else backs away in absolute terror of the homeless man, and it's the sheriff who actually has to go deal with it. And as soon as he touches the homeless guy just has this emotional reaction and starts attacking the sheriff. And and then he tries to get the guy under control by force, but the homeless guy shoves him to the ground and beats him and then runs off. And the video they take of him, they end up using just the part that makes it look like he's assaulting the guy, leaving out the entire context that he was called there to protect these other people. Ted Garcia is a brown person, right? He's called there to protect these individuals, and the only part that's released is the part that makes him look like a terrible person. Now, this is not necessarily to say the George Floyd thing wasn't a real abuse of power or some kind of bad choice was made, but it is to say the reaction to the George Floyd thing led to a lot of posts where exactly that happened. Just a cop shown shooting a black person, no context, and they just show the black person being shot and then a scream, and then they show a picture of that person, the best picture they could possibly find, and it's like, look at the supremacy, the white supremacy. And this was a very frustrating thing for me, because I have family who are in the military and who are police officers. They are good people who do their absolute best to protect society. And you see what color I am, but I'm also mixed. I'm Hawaiian. And even the paler part of my family, they're mixed as well, Native American and Mexican. So, we have the white supremacist villain, right? But it's like, you're just judging people on the pigment, right? But you don't even know anything about them, right? So it's like the social media training is to train people to either be anti-white or to be anti-yourself. But it's like, dude, like, this is more complicated than that. There's a bigger notion to what you're talking about here. But more importantly to me, watching a lot of these videos now, hey, if the cop screwed up, I'm all for, throwing the book at him. But if you just show someone this one little clip and nobody knows what's going on, you're essentially directing people to be violent and angry towards someone who might have actually just been doing their job correctly, but because you only show them this clip, it makes you have to have some kind of extreme reaction. I want to make one statement here that I think is the most important thing I can say, just because I am worried about where society is going, which is what this movie is about. Is that as a filmmaker, as a video editor of 20 years, director of 20 years, there's a hair's breadth between thinking someone is competent and thinking someone is an idiot in the edit. And when you see a clip on Instagram, on TikTok, on YouTube, when you see a clip that's, if you look at just that clip and go, oh, that person's an awful, evil person, you are just seeing the glimpse that will make you feel that way. I want you to think about that. I want you to really think about that. More important than reacting to what you see online is looking it up first. Get the entire context before you react. Because I didn't even realize we're going into this entire generation that has never learned the code of ethics or the way to interact with the internet. We're going into an entire generation that grew up on their tablets and cell phones and doesn't understand that not everything you see is real. Like, you guys just take everything for granted and just agree with whatever anyone tells you. And it's affecting the older generation as well. You know what I mean? It's like, I grew up in the time between books and the internet where we were trained, hey, don't click on that pop-up ad. Don't just agree with anything the website says. Look for other sources. Cite your sources. What are your sources? Think about what you're reading. Don't just accept everything that's said to you. And that critical thinking era clearly has been abandoned to this current generation, and I worry about all future generations. So, as someone who has made terrible actors look like good actors, trust me when I say that you should not trust what you see on this, okay? You really need to think about what's being shown to you. It is by design to make you emotional. It is by design to make you react in some kind of way and not think. And you need to think about what you're watching now and in the future more than ever before, because it will make you act ways that are not good if you don't watch it. You have to think about, is what I'm seeing true? Is it really true? Look and take the time to look at it from every angle. And yes, but that's boring. But that requires effort. Well, what else are you doing? You're already looking at your phone. Get the whole story before you react to things. Because this did happen during the BLM movement. After George Floyd, every single day was a post of a cop shooting a black person, and it would just be that moment. It would just be that exact moment. And we couldn't tell the difference between stories when someone committed a crime and it was a rightful kill, or if it was someone doing something wrong. And so we created the all cops are bad movement, which is terrible. But there are good cops out there of every color of skin doing their job to do the right thing in every neighborhood. And this is a dangerous world we live in, where people have just given up their right to think in the name of some compassionate cause that the cell phone told them to do. And this is terrible. I mean, just look at this whole Sydney Sweeney nonsense that's going on. Over jeans. Get out of here. Get out of here. And you don't even, and now in the time of AI, you don't even know if these people complaining on the internet are real. They might literally be artificial intelligence. All right? It's ridiculous. Your Instagram post, it has these 3 points that say these 3 things, that you have to say these same 3 things. And if people don't say these same 3 things, if people don't say these 3 things that are exactly the same as like all of your friends are saying, if they don't say that, then they're just uninformed and they don't know. And you have to tell them. You know, it's like, that is psychotic, ridiculous behavior. Be better than that. Think for yourself. Stop reacting to everything you see. Imagine the productivity you could have in your life if you truly cared about something and you just went out and did it. You're sick of seeing people struggle on the street. Well, go volunteer and hand out food. Imagine the productivity in your life and how much better you could make your community. If you put that energy that you put into reacting to social media into your actual community, into your neighborhood, into your neighbors, your friends, if you truly cared about people, that's what you would do. You wouldn't go out there looking for someone to hate and looking for some hate bandwagon to jump on and to prove your superiority over someone else. That makes no sense if you're asking for equality, whatever nonsense talking point is on your Instagram post that you've reshared, or in some video some psychotically angry person is talking about on TikTok. Think for yourself. So I think this Eddington's a really crucial movie for people to watch, especially the first half, because I think the first half makes the point. The minute the cop video is released calling Joaquin Phoenix a pig, when he's literally doing the job he was called out for, protecting a Mexican man, or no, he's not Mexican, but protecting a brown man and city officials. But just when you show exactly that little clip, it makes him look like this evil tyrant Nazi person. Really, none of that is in the video. Those are interpretations added to the video. It just looks like he's roughing around the guy. But again, you're cutting out the part where the homeless guy struck at him first and just went psychotic, right? And that's the threat of this movie, is that what I love is that everyone at all times is looking at their phones. And I appreciate that Ari Aster, both in his interview and you can see it in the movie, makes a point that you actively see the cell phone in the frame and whatever people are looking at and scrolling. And it really makes it feel intimate and weird. It's like, oh, I'm looking at what you're looking at on your cell phone. This is weird. You're not supposed to look at someone else's private stuff, even if they're just scrolling on the YouTube or internet. And yet companies are doing it. Companies are actively doing that constantly. While we see the people of Eddington are watching all of the cops are Nazis videos, simultaneously, Joaquin Phoenix is seeing this media of sort of these terrorist people attacking police officers. And he's conflating it with the protests, and it's like, oh my God, like there's a serious threat against me and my people, which is just these two dudes, these two dorks I work with. Like we're not biased, we're not Nazis. We just do our jobs and we go home. It's like, so you see his perspective too, and even with him, the phone is warning him and threatening him of like the threats of normal people, and it's like the phone is pitting people against each other on purpose. So whether this is programmed by a select few companies looking to get some kind of monopoly over man, or whether it's the AI already actively throwing us up against each other, the movie's pointing out that clearly the phone has this huge negative influence on individuals in society and society as a whole, that we're being destroyed by our social media influence, which is a huge and important warning to everybody. And I think that's what makes this movie probably the most important movie of this century. And what I think is beautiful, we have the storyline of Emma Stone, which is very much under the rug. We have the frame of her father that no one talks about, which is kind of weird. It's definitely a known thing. Like if you have a hanging framed photo of someone but no one talks about, it's kind of a social understood thing that, okay, that means something. You know what I mean? Because usually when you have a hanged photo of a loved one, if you really love them and they were a good person in your life, you touch the photo, you look at the photo with adoration. And if you have a hanging framed photo of someone and everyone avoids it, that means something. This was something in, I don't know if it's in the movie web interview that's in my Why It's Great radio playlist, which, if I haven't mentioned, is at the bottom of my homepage, where I'll be posting filmmaker interviews, particularly for you young filmmakers out there. I want you to have a good, healthy resource for how to look at movies, how you should be approaching your process and work, and understand it's all just options for you. You can make your own choice, but I want you to have that information. Do not rely on movie reviews as a replacement for actually learning about how movies are made from real filmmakers. So please go check that out. But it's mentioned in one of Ari Aster's interviews that the hanging photo of Emma Stone's father it's really representing this unacknowledged truth that predates us seeing the characters in the movie, that Emma Stone was abused by her father, but the mother who's living with them during COVID has made up this story that no, the person that abused her was Ted Garcia. And Ted Garcia, in a private conversation elsewhere in the movie, he's talking to a businessman who asks, well, what's the deal with this woman? Why is this such a big deal between you guys? And Ted Garcia, played by Pedro Pascal, says, we never touched. She was weird. She wouldn't touch me. And so after a couple months of not touching each other, I just left her because it was weird. And then she shows up pregnant, and supposedly it has something to do with me. And so Joaquin Phoenix, for the entire time he's known Emma Stone, has had this presumption that because of the mom, that Ted Garcia has done this terrible thing. All the while, it's understood that Emma Stone has a rocky relationship with her dad, and we don't know for sure if she's tried to tell him or not until the Austin Butler scene happens, where Emma Stone's angry at Joaquin Phoenix for running for mayor. And I know I should be saying the character names, but come on, we know them as actors. We're looking at the point of the story here, so I'm going to say the actors' names. We know Emma Stone lost it when he decided to run for mayor without even consulting her, and then he tries to make it up and say, let me make dinner, let's talk about it, and if you still don't want me to be mayor after talking about it, I'll stop trying to be mayor. And she reluctantly agrees, and he makes dinner, and then he's waiting for hours, everything gets cold, and then all of a sudden Emma Stone returns with her mother and Austin Butler to the house after being out all day. And Austin Butler is so just blatantly creepy, and he has this whole story of abuse and escaping, but he's got this kind of spaced out creepy way of talking where you just don't feel like you can trust the words coming out of his mouth. And even Joaquin Phoenix is like, you're saying these terrible things that happen to you, and you can just comfortably talk about it, like that's weird. And you just escaped, like make this make sense to me. And Austin Butler, just with absolute supreme confidence, is just like, well, hey, I didn't just escape because I was good at escaping. I made my captor fall in love with me to escape, and that was a complicated and difficult thing to do. But you see this, there's, whether or not his story is true, his behaviors are still creepy, and they get under your skin, or they got under my skin. They definitely got under Joaquin Phoenix's skin, because he just gets up and walks into the house and then says, oh, sorry, is it okay for me to be in here? And without even waiting for an answer, just keeps walking through the house. But he's looking at Emma Stone's artwork. One of the consistent visuals of Ari Aster's movies is bizarre artwork, or bizarre / threatening / sort of body horror-ish artwork. And Emma Stone's character creates all these bizarre dolls that have eyeballs in their mouth, Which now, when I think about it, I think, well, there is the metaphor of a penis to be the one-eyed monster, and so when I think about, in retrospect, the eyeball and the mouth, I can't help but wonder: is this her sort of saying two things at once, which is she's being silenced, you know what I mean, but also like she was abused by the dad, and you know what I mean, something was in her mouth that she didn't want, but not only that, her voice was snuffed out by someone else's point of view, which I think is again a consistent message of this movie. Is like, again, going back to the BLM protest where the little white girl is screaming at the black guy and telling him what he should feel and what he should think about things. And, you know, it's like, what do you make of that? You know what I mean? For the guy who doesn't agree, you know what I mean? Like, he's not acting like, oh, all this stuff totally represents my life, you know? Which is like, there are people who agree with that, you know? There's plenty of people who agree with that. They're all on the internet. But there's also plenty of people who disagree with that and actively resist that type of thinking. And they're black and they're like, that doesn't reflect my life or my point of view. When Joaquin Phoenix, he's been bullied, literally been bullied by Ted Garcia's kid throughout this entire movie. Ted Garcia does try to be nice to him. What I like about the relationship between Joaquin Phoenix and Pedro Pascal's character is that they are literally both almost the same character, but just on different sides of a point of view. You know, they just have different ideas about how society should be. But otherwise, they're pretty much these nice guys who are sentimental about something, and something matters to them. Like when we see Ted Garcia at home, he is worried about his kid getting COVID and saying, don't go to some party. Like, don't go out there and do that. So he does mean to an extent that the words he says, but at the same time, you see, as much as he's in public and tries to talk soft and sweet to everybody, when he's in private and there's a woman who disagrees with him at a council meeting, and as soon as the camera's off of him, someone shut this bitch up. Like, you see that he is totally has a mean dog side to him as well. But on Joaquin Phoenix's side, as much as he's a sheriff and he's supposed to act tough and get the homeless guy when he breaks into a bar, when he goes home, he's an even softer guy than he is in public. Like, he's twice as soft. He's so soft that when we get to the Austin Butler scene, this is where Emma Stone, she's reacting so emotionally to what he's saying, and she's really saying her own truth, which is sometimes people just can't say the horrible thing that's happened to them because it's so horrible. And you see her getting so worked up, and that's when it occurs to Joaquin Phoenix. Are you trying to say that your dad did do this thing to you? You know what I mean? And when he's trying to ask her, you know, part of it is that he did worship her dad, but at the same time, he knows something's up and has always been up, and it's just never been clarified for him. And so when, you know, the two bed scenes, you know, there's 3 bedroom scenes. The first is when he goes to see his wife and they start kissing, and then she apologizes to him. And it's clearly they have a strained relationship of some kind, a lot of sexual repression. And it's because she hasn't worked through her business. And as much as he's a nice guy, it's not enough for her to just open up because she has things she needs to unlock first. But then the second bed scene, she's mad at him and doesn't want him to come close to her. No, well, their final bed scene together is him after that asking her, so did something happen between you and your dad? But it's such a difficult, awkward thing to bring up. When there are things that are so difficult and scary to talk about, people just would rather not talk about it altogether, which is half the problem. But also it's because they don't have any model for how to approach these things. The sad part of this movie is that all the bad guys win. What makes this all happen is that in his desperation to keep both his wife and his quest for being mayor, Joaquin Phoenix tells the story that Emma Stone's mom tells him on a video posted on Facebook, saying that Ted Garcia is a predator who preyed on his wife, and that's not the actual truth. And the Emma Stone's last scene before her final scene in the movie, or her last scene before she disappears from Joaquin Phoenix, is saying on Facebook with full clarity, what happened to me didn't happen because of him. It happened because of, and Joaquin Phoenix immediately turns off the video before she says what the truth is. Because even in her absence, the truth is just so terrible for him. He just can't take it. And I think what happens to him is also off screen as well. Or rather, it's on this screen. But what happens to him is off screen as well, where he just goes through a complete flip. And I think there's a beautiful scene that is sort of, it's not a callback, but it's a full loop. Like the movie, I really consider this as two movies in one, because the opening scene, or one of the early scenes, is Joaquin going to defend Ted Garcia from the homeless person, and then his last scene with Ted Garcia alive is the noise complaint, and this is right after the video that Emma Stone releases to the world. And when Joaquin Phoenix goes to respond to that noise complaint, he tries to turn on, it's a party happening at Pedro Pascal's house, and it's a fundraiser or it's celebrating whatever he's trying to do in the community. And Joaquin Phoenix just goes and turns the sound off. Pedro Pascal just walks over, turns it right back on, and then slaps Joaquin Phoenix in the face twice. It's actually the first moment that I was on Ted Garcia's side, where for the most of the movie, he does seem kind of questionable anyway, because of this AI computer company thing he's doing. It just seems like he's up to no good, whether he knows it or not. You know what I mean? Whether he really believes it's a good thing. It just seems like what he's doing, again, the fact that he responds to the councilwoman off camera, someone shut this bitch up. You know, like, okay, this guy is not as, squeaky clean as he claims to be. He's clearly resisting something that seems to be a valid point against what he's doing. But on top of that, it seems that whatever's happening with his business is creepy and shouldn't be happening. But then on top of that, because Emma Stone vindicates him, it suddenly creates a completely different dynamic where I'm like, whoa, so Joaquin Phoenix is wrong. And when he slapped him twice, I kind of felt for Ted Garcia, it's like, damn, you tried to plaster this guy as this horrible villain, which you felt in your heart for a long time. That's who he is. So I get that you thought it, and you were misled. I get that you were totally misled, and you got slapped in the face for it. And so I understood Joaquin Phoenix's side, but I actually felt for Ted Garcia's like, man, Ted Garcia is giving him the lightest payback for what is a disgusting thing to be accused of. But I feel like this is also the straw that broke the camel's back, because he then sees Ted Garcia's son probably smoking marijuana in the back of the house with the white girl. And you realize this is probably the moment that everything happens for him in his head, where he's like, I'm going to kill this man. He ruined my wife, and now he's ruined my life. And wow, talking about this in retrospect, it makes more sense to me now. At the time of watching this, when Joaquin Phoenix just suddenly shoots and kills Ted Garcia and his son, I was mortified, and I thought, this is not the right response to what happened. But simultaneously, that's kind of the point of the movie. The same thing is, like, again, the white girl screaming at Michael, the only black character in the movie, trying to tell him what he should be feeling. It's that simultaneous feeling, like, I get how you got here, but at the same time, it's not right what you're doing. You know what I mean? Like, what you're doing is so extremely wrong. Literally, you watch the protests get worse and worse across this movie, destroying the town. And that's what much of the first half is the destruction and erosion of this town, down to the principles of these people not even being able to treat the neighbors they've known their whole lives with any form of dignity or respect. But anyway, talking about this in retrospect, I kind of get why Joaquin Phoenix changed. But it's such an extreme change for me. But not only that, there's two reasons I don't like this change. I just felt like, man, killing Ted and his son, even though clearly he fantasized about this before with the whole belief that he hurt his wife. It's just a natural thing that when you love someone, if someone hurts them, it's a natural thing to want revenge. But that being said, it's like, I get it being in his chest to want to do that. But simultaneously, I didn't like it because both with the trailer setup, but also what I wanted because of the first half of this movie, I was hoping that it would build up to a physical confrontation, like a literal 10-minute fist fight between the two characters, because they both grow to hate each other so much. I just felt like that was the release I really wanted, was that Joaquin Phoenix would be slowly eroded to the point where finally these two clash in the middle of town and they just start trashing each other. What I wanted was the 10-minute fight from They Live, where Roddy Piper and Keith David fight each other for 10 minutes long. It's a 10-minute long fight. If you haven't seen They Live is the perfect precursor movie to this movie. What I want to recommend is, if you're watching this for some reason and you haven't watched Eddington, watch They Live first and then watch Eddington, and that will be your training for how to deal with media in life. Okay, because They Live is the most honest portrayal of society that there can possibly be, and if you watch Eddington afterward, it's just gonna be like, oh, this is the sequel. Like, the aliens just kept at it. They just found other ways to get us. But that 10-minute fight was so amazing and hilarious because it's all about Roddy Piper trying to get Keith David to put on these sunglasses that allow you, a regular person, to see that we're all being hypnotized. When you're walking around, you see the world in color. You see a picture of a beautiful woman on a beach saying, go to this hotel, and then you put on the sunglasses, the world becomes black and white, and that sign of the beautiful woman on the beach, it just says mate and reproduce. And when you look at money, a regular dollar bill becomes a white sheet of paper that says, this is your God. And so Roddy Piper is trying to get Keith David to put on these glasses. Put on the glasses! And it just leads to this 10-minute fight. And it's so ridiculous because you understand, on Keith David's side, this dude is crazy. He is driving me nuts. He's talking funny, and he's obsessed with me putting on sunglasses. Hell no. And it's just so comic because you understand why both people are fighting, and you understand why both people are disagreeing, but it just produces the funniest fight scene of all time. But I felt that that's what Eddington needed. And not only that, it's what I wanted watching the movie. Going back to the trailer itself, but when you see that shot in the trailer of these two men meeting on the street, I'm recording, and you just realize, like, oh, okay, this movie is about this conflict between these two men. But the movie is really about so much more than that. It's about the nature of technology puppeteering regular human beings. But on top of that, it's about the destruction of this man who's sentimental, and he has good relatable values, but everything that he believes comes to destroy him. You know what I mean? And it's just sad to watch this character devolve to the point where first he shoots the homeless man and then throws his body into the water, which that just seems so extremely out of character. But you realize, like, that was the first major strike against him socially. is that he became this Nazi to everyone because they saw him try to deal with a homeless man, but they only watched the part where he's trying to hold the guy down, but they don't watch the part where the homeless man attacks him and then on top of that beats him up and then gets away. So everyone's just made this whole story up in their mind of what happened, calling him a Nazi and putting Nazi symbols over his pictures when that's not even what he did. And so the homeless man is like the first major offense, but then Ted Cruz is the next major offense. It's like this is what destroyed his personal life, was this belief. Ted Garcia, this is what destroyed his personal life, is this belief in this guy. And now that even that story is completely destroyed by the truth coming out from his wife, and you're just literally watching Joaquin Phoenix, who stands as tall as he can at the beginning of this movie, looking out for this old guy who can't help himself because people are pushing him around and harassing him over a mask. He literally buys him groceries. You know what I mean? Like, that's the length of his good character. But that he can fall so far into conspiracy, into false narratives, and all this stuff that he ends up becoming the very thing he stood up against at the start of the story, which he felt was Ted Garcia being sort of a dictator or leading people improperly. You know what I mean? To then now he's doing it himself and leading people on a lie, and that's exactly what he becomes. Like his fear and his enemy is what he becomes by the midpoint in the story, when he then shoots Ted Garcia and his son, and then covers it up, and then tries to blame Michael, who I think is the one like decent character in the entire movie. Because I love that the white cop who's not Joaquin Phoenix is named Guy, because he is just the definition of just a guy. And when I hear Michael, it's sort of that's the name of the angel Michael, God's greatest defender. You know what I mean? When I think of the BLM protest, and it's like this little white girl screaming in his face, telling him what to believe, and he's still standing by the rule of law, saying, you might believe all these things, but you still have to get out of the street and stop blocking traffic, because your right to protest is not a right to disrupt other people's lives. And that's the whole point, you know what I mean? And so in a way, Michael, he's the one seemingly legitimate character of virtue, and yet he kind of is almost a blank slate as much as Guy is. But Guy is he flips with whatever. Eventually, he just flips with whatever people tell him, and he's the more freaked out one when the George Floyd riot starts. Michael, are you okay? I mean, Joaquin Phoenix is also flipped out, but you see Guy is so terrified, like, man, Michael is going to turn on me because of this event that happened somewhere else, and he's just afraid. And so he flips to whatever people tell him. Although he's not like that during the protest, he becomes like that in private. And you kind of see, like, each character is reflecting the same general story, a story that's about people being gaslit and manipulated into a certain trajectory. But the only thing that's really accomplished is that everybody fights everybody, and nobody fights everybody, and nobody solves the problems. And some details I didn't notice before, but since watching a couple reviews of Eddington, there was someone who pointed out that the crazy supposed Antifa people that are chasing Joaquin Phoenix around at the end of this movie, that their plane has a logo of the globe with a hand over it, which seems to strongly be indicating that perhaps these people are actually working for the AI company that's trying to get its infrastructure and building built here in Eddington. And which it really ties all the conflicts together, because we realize that in this movie there's an unseen villain. The villain has completely masked himself by making everyone else fight each other, and just literally no one can tell that everyone's so busy fighting each other, caught up in biases and issues that they had predating COVID, but now being fueled and funneled by their phones, by the information they're receiving, which is the warning of this movie. It's like all these things we're dealing with right now, it's not that we didn't have these problems before in one form or another, but we're being encouraged to handle these problems in the worst way possible. Seriously, when we get to this final action bit with Joaquin Phoenix versus the fake Antifa, Fantifa. They seem like Antifa, but they're fake. I don't even know what Antifa is. I keep hearing it. I have no clue who they are. But anyway, this final action scene it just comes out of nowhere. It really felt like something out of a Coen Brothers movie, like this surprise ending. I felt like, is this No Country for Old Men? Is this Ari Aster's No Country for Old Men? But I really wanted a physical confrontation between him and Pedro, and it still could have ended with the fake Antifa people shooting Pedro, maybe, like he wins by default. There's so many unknown things going on. But when Joaquin Phoenix is running away from the fake Antifa guys, I do think it's interesting when he gets back to his house. And at first he thinks he sees Emma Stone packing up. And literally the camera is showing us it's Emma Stone. And then it takes a minute before he realizes he's looking at his mother-in-law. And it's her packing up, feeling guilty for driving Emma Stone to move off with these crazy psycho hippie people. And that moment alone made me think, okay, if that's not real, are these people chasing him around real? Is that actually real? And well, the movie goes on to tell us that it is real. These people do attempt to actually kill him and stab him right through the middle of the head. The symbolic meaning of this ending, there's a theme of people being puppeted, people being manipulated and controlled, which it comes full circle with Joaquin Phoenix trying to backdoor accuse Michael for killing the mayor. But even further than that, I think the first most obvious symbol of the puppeting is that the same guy, Michael, ends up being sprung from the jail because he gets locked up, right? Ends up getting sprung from the jail, and these fake Antifa guys do something to him, where they've got his mouth stuck shut. I'm like, what? First of all, what did they do to you? And he's used this bait to lure the other cops in to this huge explosive trap, and then these guys are filming this as well. When Joaquin Phoenix is stabbed in the head, and at the end he's the mayor, but he's clearly a paraplegic mute who can't speak or do anything. And it's obviously his mother-in-law who's doing all the talking and making everything happen. And she's clearly his representative controlling things. We have this leader who is really a puppet and for nefarious goals. And everything that's happened to him leading up to that point was just a part of the puppeting story. And he himself is miserable and trapped and being abused by a system that's just taking advantage of the power that he offers. It's a parabolic story about the times we're living in right now. And Eddington, I believe, is such a crucial movie. People should absolutely watch this movie, specifically because of it being about today's times. Now thinking about it the way I thought about it today, I realize it's a masterpiece. All the things that initially didn't make sense to me, talking through it now, I completely get why it happened, or I feel like I get why it happened. And yeah, maybe it's his best movie. I still love Midsommar, but I'll talk about Midsommar in another video. But anyway, those are my thoughts. That's my spoiler full review of the movie. I'm certain the score was good, but to tell you the truth, I was just so locked in on this movie. But just hats off to the entire cast and crew. You guys really put something together that was unusual for the first watch. I mean, that first watch, I came out of the movie kind of hating the movie. I loved the first half, but I hated the second half. But now that I've had time to think about it and really think about what Ari Aster meant by what he did, I realize even if I watch it again and I still don't like these things, it doesn't mean it's not a great piece of art that really has something valid to say. If you made it this far, thank you very much for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing so that I may become employed by myself and you by subscribing to me. And I'll keep making stuff like this. Mahalo and aloha. Movie nerds, dorks, and weirdos. Hopefully, I'll see you next time.